I'm going to walk you through a few diagrams that help explain the life cycle analysis of a water bottle and how they are conducted. So the life cycle analysis is generally broken down into three phases. You have the production phase, which in the case of water bottles is by far the area with the biggest impact. Then you have the use phase, and then you have the disposal or the end use or end of life phase. So those are the three distinct phases. And if we look at our first diagram here, we can see that the phases are production in this area here, which as you can see has the most variables because it is the largest, most impactful area for water bottles. And then you have the use phase, which is quite small, and the end of life phase. So I'm just going to explain a couple of concepts here, not dig into all of the data. But what's important to know here is that, especially in this case, which is for a single-use water bottle, you have various different data inputs for the creation of the bottle. So you have packaging and the production, the manufacturing of the actual bottle. So you have the actual plastic resin that's going in. So this is like the resource extraction that is needed to create the bottle. Then you have the manufacturing, the actual blow molding in the factory of the bottle. And then you have things like the packaging required to move that plastic bottle in its batch to the next phase. Then you have the actual beverage production. So getting the water, the electricity, power needed for filtering that water, transporting that water if it's not coming from the exact place where the bottle is being filled, etc. So a lot of different factors there going into actual beverage that's going to go into the bottle, in this case the actual water. And then you have distribution and the impact of the actual marketplace where the bottle is sold. So getting the filled water bottles to the market, getting the empty water bottle to where it's going to be filled, the filled water bottle to where it's going to be sold, and then refrigeration at the market where it's going to be sold, etc. And what's important to note here is that if you're evaluating the single bottle, which most of these studies are, then you have to take a small portion of each of the impacts from each phase here and attribute it to a single bottle. So a good way to assess that or give an example of that may be in distribution. Maybe there's thousands of bottles that are being distributed by a single truck. So you have to take a small percentage of the impact of that truck and the materials used to distribute it to get a evaluation or an estimate for what the single bottle's share of that impact would be. So all of that is taken into account in these studies. So they're quite complex, as you can imagine. Now in the use case here for the single-use water bottle, transport is going to be relatively low. It's essentially, what portion of a consumer's vehicle emissions or impact going to the store is attributable to that one bottle. Obviously, they're going to be shopping for many other things, and people are going to have different types of cars, etc. So there are various assumptions made here. And again, just a portion of that average trip is allocated to the impact of the water bottle. Then you have washing, which would be a factor for reusable water bottles. And when we're comparing single use versus reusable, we will see that as a factor here. And I'll show you an example of that in the next slide. Then we have the refrigeration at home. So that would be the use cycle. It's quite simple for single use, as you can see here. A little bit more complex for reusable, but not much. Most of the impact, as I mentioned, is in the production phase here. And then we have end of life, so how it's disposed of. So there are various different options here, and most life cycle analysis studies are going to have impacts vary based on the end of life scenario for the bottle. So whether or not it was actually recycled or it went to a landfill, etc. So here's a diagram from a different study, and this one's a nice example for us to see the difference between a single-use water bottle, as you can see here with the gray areas, versus a reusable water bottle. And this is a more high-level view of what the life cycle for each would be. So you can see here in production that both are quite similar. You have to get the raw materials, you have to do the actual production, and then you have to have some level of transportation in between factories and or to the market. What's different here is the use, obviously. So the reusable water bottle is going to be used much differently than a single use. Single use will be filled, transferred to market, used, and then disposed of. We'll go into disposal or end use, end of life phase here. Whereas a reusable is going to be used again and again. This is where calculations and assumptions around how many times the bottle would be used before being disposed of come into play. So you can also see water sources, as an example, will be a difference between the single use filled here and then delivered to market and the source of water here versus filled multiple times at home or elsewhere, and the source of that water and the impact that they may have. So again, these studies will go through various different scenarios, whether the water is coming from the tap, and in this case, it looks at a very specific region and the impact that the tap water would have there versus bulk bottled water, or some have filling stations included as well. So a lot of different variations here. Then you have, of course, the washing factors, and many different variables can go into that as well. And then disposal, ideally for the reusable water bottle, it's going to be reused multiple times for life would be wonderful, but in most cases they're not always going to last for life, but there may be some recycling factored in here, and as well for the single use, some recycling factored in. In some studies, it will factor in what percentage of bottles get actually recycled. In other cases, it will lay out different scenarios for whether it's recycled or goes to landfill, etc. In this study, it's assigning weights based on what percentage of these types of bottles actually get recycled or go to landfill. So there's a walkthrough, a quick overview of what the life cycle analysis for water bottles can look like. If you have any specific questions or any follow-up questions, let me know in the comments, and we'll try to get a follow-up video for you. Thank you.